Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Davenport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm going to start off by letting you know that I will be sharing my time with my honourable colleague from Alfred Pelin. So, Mr. Speaker, it is such a pleasure for me to rise in the House to speak on behalf of the residents of my riding of Davenport on Budget 2017, which was released on March 22nd. I think it's a good budget. I think there's a lot of positive benefit for the people in my riding. It's not a big spend budget like Budget 2016 was, but I think it's a responsible budget. I think it's a targeted budget. And I think it's the next step in the government's ambitious plan to make smart investments that will create jobs, grow our economy, and provide more support for the middle class and those working hard to join it. And I'm going to be targeting my comments very specifically in a few key areas: jobs and economy, transit, affordable housing, and healthcare, because I think those are the key areas that are of great interest to the people of Davenport. Now, I've been blessed over the last couple of months to hold a number of community pop-up offices around the riding, and so I've heard very loud and clear from the residents of Davenport that their top issue is jobs and economy. People are worried about being able to afford a decent living, both today and moving forward. Some have part-time work and want full-time work. Some have full-time work, but they feel that they might have there's some changes that are happening within their industry and they might be losing their jobs. Some are on contract. But for all of them, they're worried about their jobs, they want better paying jobs, and they want more predictable pay. And so I was very, very pleased, Mr. Speaker, to see that there was a focus on innovation and skills in Budget 2017. And I think the reason I'm so excited is because I think it's going to help better prepare Canadians for the workforce of today and tomorrow. There's a number of initiatives that are going to help people to upgrade their skills. There's more co-op and work integrated learning. There's more support for adult workers who are trying to go back to school or to upgrade their skills who are supporting their families. There's also more support for families who are caregivers, who are trying to take care of their children. And then there's also a huge section around trying to help new immigrants or new Canadians or newcomers who have wonderful foreign credentials to get them into the workforce a lot quicker. So I'm going to go through a list of key initiatives that I think are important to point out, that I think are something that I've pointed out to the residents of Davenport that I think will be beneficial, not only to those in Davenport, but also to all Canadians. So I won't go through all the numbers in terms of, whenever we talk about numbers, 2.7 billion here and 132 million there, people's eyes kind of go a little bit glassy-eyed. So I'll just go through sort of key initiatives. We're providing quite a bit of money for skills training and employment supports for unemployed and underemployed Canadians under the Labour Market Transfer Agreement, and we're giving about $3 billion for that. I think this is super important. I can't tell you, I just had a conversation with someone a couple of days ago. He says, Julie, I have 3 jobs. I'd really like to have 1. And so I said to him, good news, we've put some money into Budget 2017 that will help you improve your skills, so that you could hopefully be able to have 1 job that will be able to support your own lives. We're putting a substantial amount of money into making the EI program more flexible to enable the unemployed to pursue self-funded training while remaining eligible for EI benefits. This has always been a puzzle to me, Mr. Speaker, the fact that those who were on EI looking for jobs wanted to self-improve, but they lost their benefits if they actually went on and did their own training. And I'm glad that we've actually fixed that. We've also put a substantial amount of money, almost $500 million, to expand eligibility for student financial assistance for both part-time students and students with dependent children. And what we want to do is to make it easier for adult learners to qualify for student financial assistance. There are so many people who say, Julie, I have got to be able to support my family. How is it that I can improve my skills while I do that? And this actually will help to support them to do that. So it helps them to access financial support for them to go back to school on a part-time basis, upgrade their skills, and move into a profession that either pays more or a profession that gives them more happiness. There's also a number of supports that we provide that will help families to take care of their families. So we have a new EI caregiving benefit that will provide a substantial amount of money for adult care and for child care. We've also made adjustments to provide EI parental benefits for up to 18 months. We've also put some money in to allow expectant moms to claim EI for up to 12 months prior to their due date. And the last thing I've put in here that I think is very relevant, we've also put a substantial amount of money, $7 billion, to create a number of more spaces for high quality, affordable childcare. And the last thing I'll mention, Mr. Speaker, is that, I had a wonderful woman who's a young doctor from Mexico City see me last Saturday at my last pop-up, and she said to me, Julie, I'm a doctor, and I'd love to be a doctor in Canada. I've just come here. I've married a Canadian. I'm now a permanent resident. How is it that I can actually use my skills to contribute to serving the Canadian population? And so we've put $30 million over 5 years to be able to help those with foreign credentials, like doctors, be recognized, to help them get Canadian experience, and to help them to get started working in the Canadian economy as soon as possible. So, Mr. Speaker, that's just the first part. I also think that we've put a tremendous amount of money into transit. I could tell you that as a downtown west riding, so an urban riding in Toronto, one of the biggest irritants for the residents of my riding is transit. They want to be able to have reliable transit, they want to be accessible, and they want it to be affordable. And that's what they're looking for. They're also very big supporters of active transportation, so bike lanes, so basically cutting across traffic, going through bike paths and lanes, Ontario hydro routes, so that it allows them to cross the city in a more expedited way. And so, as an environmentalist, I love more dollars in transit because it's less pollution, less CO2 emissions, and also there's a huge economic benefit. It moves both people and goods around seamlessly. So, Budget 2017 has announced $20.1 billion over 11 years, 4 more dollars to team up with the provinces and territories to build new urban transit networks and service extensions. So what I'm hoping that'll translate to in Toronto is a downtown relief line. We desperately need additional ways to move people across the downtown core, and also to finish up the work around the Eglinton LRT. And in addition to this $20 billion investment, we are also putting $5 billion of additional dollars into transit from Canada's Infrastructure Bank. And so again, that's $25 billion additional dollars, and that's in addition to the $3.4 billion that we announced last year in 2016 budget to improve our public transit networks, to expand it, to get people around, to make sure that it's accessible, reliable, and affordable, which is a key issue for the residents of Davenport. And I know that these investments will transform the way that Canadians move, work, and live. Mr. Speaker, another key area that I'm really proud of in terms of our investments in Budget 2017 is affordable housing. People in Davenport say, not only do we need affordable housing, but we also need to be able to afford to live in Toronto because it's become so expensive. So I'm delighted that the federal government is stepping up to the plate. I want to give huge kudos to our Minister of Children, Families and Social Development for his leadership on this. We started last year with $2.2 billion over 2 years to give Canadians more access to affordable housing, to give more loans and financing tools so that we could develop more affordable rental units. And that actually also allowed for the re-signing of co-op agreements, of which I have 2 or 3 in my riding. And they were very happy to see that money come from the federal government. What Budget 2017 does is it announced a historic $11 billion over 10 years. And what's historic about that is it's actually that it's 10-year funding, Mr. Speaker. And this is wonderful news because it allows cities to actually plan ahead, and it provides a lot of stability. So the agreements are actually being funded now, but the agreements are actually being negotiated now with municipalities across the country. And what it will translate into in Toronto is a number of new affordable housing units. It'll renovate existing units, it'll provide more rent subsidies, and it'll provide more affordable housing spaces. And the last thing I'll mention, Mr. Speaker, because I know I've run out of time, is that there's additional dollars for mental health and home care, $11 billion over 10 years. That translates in Ontario for $4.2 billion over the next decade. So that's $2.3 billion for home care and $1.9 billion for mental health supports. Extraordinarily important that it's been a long time coming in terms of additional dollars and additional focus on mental health. I'm looking for more dollars that will support the ethnic communities and help them to get the support and the resources that they need. And for home care, more people want to be taken care at home. And I'm very delighted with this investment at the national level. So, Mr. Speaker, thank you for this opportunity to speak on Budget 2017. This is a good budget for Canadians. It's a good budget for the residents of Davenport, and I very much look forward to the questions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire, the honourable member for Essex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for her speech and certainly looking for the good inside of this omnibus bill, bringing to light some of the things that she sees as benefits. One of the things that has been swept under the carpet in this bill, though, is something that's the elephant in the room, and that's the infrastructure bank that's going to be created in this budget. And it's something that Liberals certainly didn't campaign on, really aren't speaking about in this House in their speeches, although it will change and have a serious impact on Canadians, Mr. Speaker, on their lives. The member spoke about affordability, the importance of working people and families to get a break, to be able to afford their lives and make them better for themselves. Mr. Speaker, Bill C-44 establishes the Canada Infrastructure Bank. And can the member explain to us what Canadians have to gain from this bank, other than privatization of infrastructure that they paid for with their taxes, and potentially the new user fees that they will pay?
The honourable member for Davenport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the honourable colleague for her question. First, I don't agree with the premise that this budget bill is an omnibus bill. I don't believe that that is so. I believe that everything in the budget is about the budget, and so I personally don't support omnibus bills, and so I don't agree that this is the case. The second thing I'd like to mention, Mr. Speaker, is in terms of the infrastructure bank, I believe that we are now up to about $180 billion over 12 years in terms of investment in infrastructure in this country. What we're trying to do is invest not only in public transit, but also to build up the infrastructure that will allow us to have the backbone for a strong economy both today and in the future, Mr. Speaker. And so what I would say is the infrastructure bank is all about how is it that we can create, that we can tap in to some private sector dollars that will actually help us to further leverage the $180 billion that we're actually putting into infrastructure investment in this country. Thanks so much, Mr. Speaker.
Good.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Edmonton Riverbend.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Do just want to thank the member for her speech, but also bring up some of the factors that we're facing in Alberta. We're in the midst of a jobs crisis there. It's despite what the government is saying, it's not getting any better. We still have hundreds of thousands of people out of jobs. But then we have an infrastructure minister that comes and keeps making announcement after announcement in my hometown of Edmonton. For example, he made one announcement that actually doesn't even start construction until 2023. You could promise anything under that auspice. So this budget also goes through a number of different promises on the infrastructure side of things, and I'm curious as what the member thinks as to why would we not start the construction now as opposed to waiting 10, sometimes 15 years down the road?
The honourable member for Davenport.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the honourable member for his excellent question. I have a little bit of a confession to make. In my riding of Davenport, there's a number of people that are not very big supporters of pipeline approval. And what I've explained to them is that I fully support the approval of pipelines. I believe that we have to support the economy of Canada. We have to support we are a resource-based economy, and so it is our responsibility always to think about the best interests of Canadians. We have, there's already 2 new pipelines that are bringing resources to Tidewater. Those will create both today and tomorrow thousands of new jobs, and I think that that'll benefit not only Alberta, but BC and a number of other provinces. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I think we have time for one more short question. The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member for Toronto Davenport has just, I'm sure, said something she believes to be true, but is she aware that the National Energy Board refused to hear evidence from Unifor that building Kinder Morgan would cost Canadian jobs by shipping out raw product and likely leading to the closing of the Chevron refinery in Burnaby?
The honourable member for Davenport.
Pardon?
I don't. Thank you.
So, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the honourable member for her question. I actually don't. I don't know all the details of all the pipelines that have been approved. I know that there's been 2 that have been approved. I think that they've been. They are very positive in terms of bringing our resources to Tidewater, in terms of creating jobs, in terms of being helpful to the overall economy. I think also.
Order. The honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge on a point of order.
About the relevance of both the answer to the previous speaker's question and to this question and answer. The issue was the Budget Implementation Act, and the question that was being addressed had to do with infrastructure, and now we're talking about something that's completely off topic, and I ask you to bring the members to order.
I thank the honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge for his intervention. Indeed, the issue of relevance does come up, as is often compelled by the exchange during the period for questions and comments. Admittedly, the particular issue that was posed by the honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands may not have a direct link to the issue that's before the House in a direct sense. However, when these items come up in the course of an exchange under questions and comments and a topic has been touched upon, we normally allow other commentary on that particular issue if it's been raised in the sense either in the speech of the honourable member or during questions and comments. So this often tips us into a different area. We watch closely, but usually in the section on questions and comments we do allow a fair bit of liberty, I would say, in that unless that continues in a string for an exceedingly long time. And then we'll try to get back on subject, but the honourable member is certainly correct and right to bring this notice to the House. The honourable member for Davenport.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. I think that the reason I'm talking about pipelines is very much Budget 2017 is very much about growing our economy. It's very much about providing more opportunities for the middle class, for workers across this country, both today and tomorrow. I think in answer to the original question from the member from Saanich Gulf Islands, to me that what I have comfort in is that we've put in a new process in place that takes both environmental and economic concerns into account. I have a lot of confidence in that process. I think it's a thoughtful process, and I think that it's one that will actually help us to make the best decisions for Canada moving forward. Thanks so much.